welcome back, everyone. So, now we have a panel discussion. All these 5 great sound engineers from the industry. The title of this panel discussion is User-Centric Design of Intelligent Music Production, Music Technology. We had really interesting and inspiring talks from this morning on AI technology, biotechnology, and perception. There are loads of things that we need to think about and we need to research on and develop. But with all this new technology and research being conducted, the most important thing is the user need. We really need to understand what our end users need to, how can we benefit them, really? As researchers and developers, we really need to understand the user need. So that's why we have this session with professional sound engineers. So now it's time to hear our users' opinions. Now, I'm going to introduce our panelists. From far left, we have John Burton. John works primarily as a live sound engineer. He has worked with artists as diverse as Radiohead, Lulu, Stereophonics, and for the last 14 years, The Prodigy. John is also the co-owner of a 5-studio recording complex in Sheffield, the Laundry Rooms. John has been involved in education for many years through guest lectures and the online source site called Soul Sound. And on his right, Florian Kammerer is a sound engineer for ORF, the Austrian TV since 1990, active in surround sound and loudness. He is the chair of the EBU group P-Loud, where perceived loudness measures like LUFS and R128 have been standardized. He is also a pioneer in surround recording on location. And in the middle, we have Olga Fitzroy. Olga is a recording engineer and mixing engineer, mainly working out of Air Studios in London. She works on orchestral and electronic film and TV scores and engineers for the band Coldplay. She has worked in stereo, 5.1, Atmos, and VR formats. And we have Anna Monti. Anna is a sound designer specializing in VR and is the co-founder of the German-based audio post-production company called Delta Soundworks. She's a graduate of California State University, Chico, where she studied music industry and technology, and the Film Academy Baden-Württemberg, is it the right pronunciation? Yeah, Württemberg, where she studied film sound design. For her work as sound designer, Anna has received diverse sound awards, including Best Sound Design in a Drama Series at the LA Webfest 2015, and the Best Sound nomination from the LA Film Review. And lastly, Mirek Stiles started working at Abbey Road Studios as a recording engineer in 1998, working on a diverse range of projects, including The Lord of the Rings, the Beatles anthology, Muse, Kanye West, and Paul McCartney. Today, Mirek runs the studio's audio products department, leading development of a range of software and hardware releases with Waves Audio and Chandler Limited. Mirek also sits on the board and acts as an advisor on the Abbey Road Red incubation program, and is currently exploring and experimenting with the spatial audio. Okay, so thank you for participating in this discussion. It's really nice to have all of you here with us. So, as I introduced, there's a lot of different technologies being developed, and especially with AI and machine learning rising, there are a lot of things that we try to automate, and then we try to kind of apply some smart technology to monitor the conditions of mix and recording. As you have seen in the poster room, there are a lot of researchers trying to innovate and the current music technology, the paradigm of the current music technology. There are new interfaces being designed, new ways of mixing audio, and new ways of recording audio, and so on. So firstly, we really need to understand how professional engineers approach when they try to achieve artistic goals, their creative goals. What kind of technical workflow do they go through? So we'll just briefly hear from each one of you how, yeah, please just describe your works in everyday.
So being primarily a live sound engineer, and also because I work for a band called The Prodigy, who pretty much just do festivals. So I start each year. This year we started doing festivals in May, and every weekend I fly out to set up my equipment. I always tour my own mixing desk, and I walk into a festival at about 7 o'clock in the morning. It's usually raining, and I set up my mixing desk. I carry my own control system, but I use the festival speaker system. My first task is to check it's all working, which sounds like something, it's a presumption that you should make, but to be honest, it's not always the case. So I always check my equipment, I always check everything works, and I'll also integrate any equipment I've got that I'm carrying with me with the system. The first major tool I use this is I'll use something like ArrayCalc, which is a system optimization system. So I'll look at how my speakers, because I do The Prodigy, it's all about the sub. So obviously I'm not going to turn up without extra sub bass. So I carry 8 triple 21-inch speaker cabinets, which is about 80,000 watts extra sub. Because this is my job, you know, my job is to make an impact and to give people a visceral experience when they go to see the band. So I have to integrate my subs with the house subs. So the first thing I'll do is I'll look at how their system is done, and then I'll look to see how I can arrange my subs in conjunction with their subs so it works as a cohesive system. And I'll use prediction software to do this, depending which manufacturer the festival system's using, whether it's D&B, L Acoustics, or any, one of the other ones, or as we get further away, companies you've never heard of, which is always a bit scary. And then I'll use the most important tool I've got with me, which is my ears. And I'll walk about and listen, because you can only predict a certain amount, and prediction works on the fact that you think everything's going to be working. So the first thing I do is take a mono signal and pan it from one side to the other and listen and make sure it's all working. And then I'll go around and listen to that mono signal across the entire field. Obviously, I don't tend to walk too far away, but I'll walk across the front of the speakers and make sure it's all huffing and puffing at the same time. Then I'll use, because I've got an incredibly loud band with a very large speaker system on stage pointing right at me, I'll then time align, and I'll use either I use Spectrafu because I'm an old Mac person, or Smart, to time align the speakers so that you perceive the sound as coming from the center of the stage, which is incredibly important to me. So I'm using 2 quite sophisticated pieces of software, and this has just got easier and easier. In the days when I started, this just wasn't possible. And this has become a very integral part of my day-to-day life. And as the array calculators get better, then we can start making changes to the PA system based on calculations in the computer, and I rely on those heavily, and I pretty much never question the results they give me until I listen to them. And then I'll kind of maybe tweak them a bit, depending on how it actually works. So I'll use that, and then I'll go and mix it on a very old analog console, because I haven't found a desk that I can work as fast or sounds as good as my Midas XL3 analog console. And that's kind of, that's the majority of my life, and the rest of the time studio, but these people are better about talking about studios than me. Florian.
Thank you, thank you. I have basically, these days, 3 different workflows. My most frequent one is very easy as far as how much I actually operate the console, which is a 2, 3, 4 fader mix. In Austrian television, we mix documentaries, little 3-minute pieces, whatever, as live. So we have the talent sitting in the studio. We have, the director, whoever it is, sitting right next to me. I have, all the text in front of me with time code cues, and we record as live. And if there's a mistake, we rewind and we punch in again. So this is the majority of my work. So it's, in my case, not just getting the mix right, but I really am the first person who sees everything coming together. So I also comment on the content. I comment on if there's a grammarly mistake, if there is something is not really clear. So I also really work together with the director. Yeah, that's the most prominent, the most frequent workflow I have. Then I do post-production on kind of documentaries that come kind of pre-edited, prefabricated out of the edit room, and I do audio sweetening, topping, tailing, EQing, getting rid of bumps, of clicks, etc. So these days, in that realm, I call myself an audio plumber, because the source material is getting worse and worse, and I have to fix things just much more than I actually can mix. So I'm not the mixer, I'm the fixer. And that takes for, and you get very proficient at that and very quickly at that, but for, just to give you an idea, I just did a 35-minute with, I don't know, 15 tracks or so, which I had to sift through. A very active documentary that takes almost a day to get to a stage where you can then go into the mix, actually. So that is the hint where I would actually like some help, yeah? Maybe some automatic help, yeah? If that could be done while hitting a button and I go drink a coffee and come back and this is done the way I want it to be done, yeah, and then I start mixing, that would be fabulous, yeah? And the third workflow is, which I do, is music production, music post-production. I do our large kind of cultural concerts, like the New Year's concert, Vienna Philharmonic. I do the editing for that, and that is basic music editing. So I have to be musically trained for that, etc. It's super high quality source material. You know, there's no clicks or thumbs. There are, of course. We paint away cuffs and these kind of things. Next hint, getting rid of cuffs and this kind of thing, yeah. But that is music editing and kind of optimizing the surround sound reproduction, and I'll do it currently also in immersive audio, the New Year's concert, which we put on a Blu-ray. That's the three workflows I have.
Hi, I'm Olga Fitzroy, and I'm a recording mix engineer. So one of the things I do is I do a lot of film scores, which generally involves a big orchestra, either at Abbey Road or in Lyndhurst Hall. So that's probably the most complex thing that I do. It can be, I don't know, 60 odd microphones to set up. So I choose the microphones and position them. And then on the day I'll record, and I'll have a Pro Tools recordist and an assistant engineer who'll help me with that. And then I often mix that music that I've recorded. Generally, I guess the most common format I'll mix in is 5.1 for film. And also a lot of TV these days I have to deliver in 5.1 as well. So the recording happens through an analog desk, and then in general I will mix in Pro Tools. I don't tend to mix on desks anymore just because of recallability. And I guess that in mixing is probably a point where I could probably do with, there's a lot of things that I could do with speeding up that aren't necessarily creative. And we do try and do a lot with templates, so a film score, generally the source material and the palette is the same throughout the whole score, so once you've got your initial settings, you can quite easily transfer them from one cue to the next. But often you might mix scores that your end result might not be too dissimilar. It might be the same orchestra recorded in the same room, but different composer and slightly different programmed elements. But it might be different amounts of players or different mic availability or different studios, so your template won't be the same, even though you're kind of aiming for a similar result. So I could see that being an area where maybe AI could actually kind of figure out what you're aiming for and give you a basic template setting without you having to, at the start of every session, put on all your EQs, EQ everything, do all your panning, where that could be done for you. And then I did a similar thing with bands, and I guess that is often more diverse because band stuff is so different, depending on who you're working with. So I think probably on the film, TV stuff, I could see a bit of AI coming in useful.
Yeah, I do sound for VR, so there is no workflow. It's currently being made as I speak. I think it really depends. That's a little bit annoying because with every project we get, depending on if it's interactive, if it's linear, if it's a mixture of both, each time it's a different workflow and it's a pain. And even with linear stuff, you need to figure out, is it going to end up on YouTube 360? Is it going to end up on Facebook 360? They both have different things. One you can do head oh god, no, I forgot that. Head-locked, sorry. You can do stuff that are head-locked. That means it's not going to rotate with your head. So if you have a voiceover, for example, you don't necessarily want it to rotate when you rotate your head. But I think that's only available on Facebook now and not on YouTube. I also work with things that are interactive, so straight into the game engine, so either Unity or Unreal. I'm actually the person that does all the sounds, and I give everything to my business partner who deals with the mess. So thankfully I have his help for that. But from the beginning I need to understand where's this movie or VR experience gonna end up. So if it's going to be done in Unreal, there's certain requirements. If there's going to be in Unity, can I start from the beginning doing things in higher order ambisonics, or do I do only first order? So yeah, it's definitely a work in progress. I have a huge wish list for developers. Maybe we can talk one-on-one, but yeah, currently I come from the traditional media, so I work with Pro Tools. I'm slowly getting into Reaper, which is fantastic and has so much flexibility. So depending on the project, I either jump to Reaper or I continue with Pro Tools and see how things go.
Great.
Totally sympathise with everything you just said there. I'm not really sure I have a workflow either, sort of just making up as I go along. I mean, traditionally, Abbey Road, we do film scores, rock, pop, urban, recording, mixing. More recently, we've got a film mixing studio for Dolby Atmos, mixing stage, I should say. We do mastering as well, lots of archive work. Then we have apps, plugins, so we do a bit of everything really. So AI could play many roles in many of those things, which we'll talk about a bit in a little bit, I'm sure. But yeah, more recently I've been studying and looking into recording and mixing workflows for VR and spatial audio in general. So that's anything from recording bands and orchestras using ambisonic microphones, spatial arrays, traditional spot miking, through to the wild west of plugins that are available at the moment. What works, what doesn't work, how you get audio into game engines, how you play around with it in a game engine, and just making sure that, I guess, Abbey Road is kind of ready for if hopefully it sort of kicks off seriously and is adopted on a mass consumer level.
Great, yeah. So yeah, it's really great to hear your workflows, and actually, even if there's no workflow, that's actually where this area where we need to work on, especially in VR. Actually, it's really difficult to work on VR because there are so many different tools trying to do the same thing, but there are different paradigms, and there's no standard platform, and so yeah, there are many things that we should work on in VR area. John, you mentioned about yeah, in live sound, there are so many things to take care of at the same time. You know, in a busy, like in a live environment, you have to take care of the bass management and health and safety issues, and you know, a lot of things at the same time. That's I think it's kind of really challenging. You know, in a busy station like when you have so many microphones and so many cables to deal with.
It's the actual mixing of the band is probably the simplest thing I do.
Okay.
Because it's a controllable, reasonable number of channels. I know the songs, and I'm doing something creative and melodic. The most important thing for me is the fact that, unlike in a studio where you're in a fixed environment that doesn't change from day to day, I'm in an environment that is built every day, and I have to check the building works, which is the major grindstone for me. And any part of AI that can take that away from me and take some of the pressure, just the pressure of having to walk around a field and listen to different things and align on the smallest festival I do, I've got at least 5 different sound sources that all need time aligning. And that's the minimum. It can be anything up to 16, 20 even sound sources that all need aligning to a center point on the stage so that everyone in the audience gets the same sound, because I'm a big believer in democracy of sound for audiences. Everyone at the festival should get the same experience. Everyone should be able to hear the words, which is very important. And just the sheer laborious nature of going around and just making sure that is done. And that is very much a thing that can be taken care of by software. Because believe it or not, I don't actually want to go and listen to every single speaker. I just want to stand behind the desk, but I have a responsibility to the audience to check that this all works.
So how do you think, how accurate do you think those prediction models and software could be? I mean, when you compare that to your own hearing, where are we at
I think we're at 40%.
40%?
I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
I think the software modelling of live speaker systems has got so much better, and now there's a new one, because also I have to worry about noise pollution as well, which is a major thing. I'm working to a dB level at every single festival, so I have to be mixing below 100 dB. So I have to be aware of what's happening all around, which way the wind's blowing, how it sounds behind me. There's bits of the field that I'll never get to hear. Remote monitoring has got to become part of making an efficient system. It's something that needs working on. It's beginning to happen, so it's not there. But it's progress is being made, but it's being driven by noise pollution. So most of the advances that are being pushed on us are because otherwise we're going to lose this industry. We're going to lose the ability to do sound at festivals because we're annoying the neighbours too much. So that's kind of driving it more than. Because believe it, promoters don't want to spend any more money on speakers. Nobody wants to spend any more money. So having software that can optimize how speakers work in an area that's where money's becoming available.
Definitely sounds like an area we need to work on.
Yeah, and there's lots of potential. And there are the technology and the software should, it just needs adapting because it exists in other forms. It just needs adapting for live sound.
Okay, great. Olga, you mentioned about using template in your workflow. Could you elaborate on that a little bit further? I mean, what kind of automated templates could be beneficial in your work?
So at the moment, for each project, basically, I'll start a template afresh. So build all my tracks, put in all my EQs, all my effects, all my routing to different stems, because most projects will have slightly different requirements. So I don't quite know how it would work, but maybe something that goes, okay, so the frequency response of Olga's orchestra stem is always roughly like this, and it would know how to achieve that, and it would know where, like, say, your tree mics are always panned, where your violin one mics are panned, and that kind of thing. And I was also sort of wondering whether something similar to that might be helpful for composers who have to mix their own music. So a lot of kind of low to medium level TV shows, the composers end up mixing the music themselves. Or they might be able to, I've done this before, where I've gone in for a day and made them a template and balanced perhaps the most important cue, like the opening titles, and then they sort of copied and pasted that and used that to mix the rest of their score. So something to help composers who are maybe not trained mixers, but do have to mix something. Yeah,
what comes to my mind is, if we could kind of make a machine that can learn your workflow, what you do normally, and through machine learning. If the machine can learn your usual work style, then it could actually create the templates,
exactly,
adaptively, for different types of sounds. And exactly. Yes, I think. Florian, you also talked about. A lot of your work is fixing problems, because the source quality is bad, and then could you also explain a little bit more on that?
That for me would be, I think, the most obvious place to have some help. I would really kind of need the assistant that kind of preps the stuff before I go into it. Either be it in the first workflow where I just get a finished M&E from the edit room that has problems, because they just don't have the tools or the experience in the video edit room to tackle all the mistakes, the clicks and pops and thumps and the EQ problems. So I have a finished one, and if there would be some process before we start the session or even while we are doing the session to sift through and correct the obvious mistakes, that would
What kind of mistakes usually?
You know, the plops of microphones, wind in the lav microphones, wrong placement of lavaliers with exaggerated chest resonances, you know, which I would have to EQ and stuff like that. But on these kind of finished M&D tracks, I only can do, you know, broader strokes because everything is already, you know, mixed. I cannot unmix. If I could unmix these things, you know, source separation is is a very, very big topic, of course, and unmix in a way that I have enough separation to actually be able to tweak the balance a bit. And the obvious one is some background music under a piece to camera, or under an interview being too loud, or the wrong music, or you know, too much high frequencies in the music, too many high frequencies. If I could do that, you know, easily, great, of course. Yeah. So that was the kind of the one scenario, and the other one would be where I really have a session. Usually these days it's an AAF, the advanced authoring format, kind of interchange format from the edit room, where I get, you know, loads of tracks with little snippets of sound, where, you know, fades are missing or wrong, or where the EQ needs to be adjusted for every single snippet or whatever. And if a machine, if an AI kind of process could kind of watch me or listen to what I'm doing, what I'm usually doing, what is the majority of the work I'm doing regarding EQ, thumb removal, because now I'm very fast at thumb removal. You paint it away these days in the kind of spectral repair softwares, but still it needs 10 seconds. If it could be done in 0.1 second, you know, with just off or automatically, that would be great. Or just maybe an EQ that gives me automatically where are unusual resonances, so that I just pull things down and don't have to search for the frequency.
That can really speed up your workflow.
That would speed it up, and the machine or the algorithm could learn while I do it and take over more and more and offer me things. I would do it that way. Is that okay for you? And I tick it off. That's good. I would like that. And he can repeat this kind of things.
But then the machine
and learning and learning, getting better and better. And in the end, I just hit do it and go for a coffee and come back and everything's nice. That would be great. Yeah,
that'd be great. Yes.
Save me hours. Yeah,
exactly,
and I can concentrate then on the dramaturgical.
And then machines really need to be intelligent.
Because, well, that's what the workshop is all about.
Point. I mean, because there are so many different types of source materials, and the machine needs to understand the context as well. I mean,
but it's a different kind of application in a way that I mean, I would actually call WIMP the workshop on intelligent media production because it's not only music. You know, we have so many different areas. But in my case, the most frequent problems is actually problematic source material. I think it really is. There's so much, you know. I mean, people are thrown out into recording stuff that absolutely no idea. And we have to fix it, and we can fix it. That's why nothing changes, you know, coming from the outside, because we can fix these things.
I think it's coming along. Least, I'm sure some of the delegates here are source separation expert. I'll invite some questions and comments soon. But, you know, there are technologies like adaptive EQs and noise cancellation based on AI from some company. You know, I'm sure a lot of people are using the tool these days. You know, noise cancellation tools, and and source separation on mixing. This kind of research is being done. So I'm sure.
I know that is certainly very exciting and interesting. But how good this can be in the future.
I have a question for you both. So you said no workflow in VR. So we are still in the early stage of exploring, 3D sound or VR and all this. So what is the biggest challenge, you know, in the presence of no workflow? What is the biggest challenge you encounter when you work on VR stuff?
I think for me the biggest challenge at the moment is the concept of personalized HRTFs.
Okay.
If anyone's ever had it done, it's a very laborious, or it can be very laborious, or just a pain in the arse generally. But it does make a big difference to how you perceive height and information behind you. I would like to think that AI could play a part in simplifying that process massively, so that people don't even have to think about it. It just happens in the background by, I don't know, scanning a photograph of your face or something, or some sort of process that AI just does it in the background automatically, and you don't have to worry about it. Because I think the difference. The difference between using a standard HRTF for rendering and versus your own is significant. Can really improve the experience. Don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Stereo. Yeah, mixing in the medium is very important. I'll do a little bit of advertisement for our partners in Germany. They're called Dear Reality. I don't know if anyone knows them. And I think they're launching today at IBC. Their tool is called Spatial Connect. So it connects your game engine with your DAW. And that means that you see all your soundtracks within the VR space. So the most annoying thing is definitely putting on the glasses. Yes, remove it, mouse, click, click, put it on again. It's very tedious, it's very annoying. So with that, you can actually keep the glasses on and mix everything in VR. It's pretty cool. But that's mostly for mixing. So me as a sound designer, I don't get to have that much fun with Spatial Connect because, it's for the final phase. It's for after you've done everything. Now I can just place it in the virtual space. My wish is definitely that it goes to mixed reality, that I don't actually have this thing blocking everything, but I think we still need a couple of years for that, where I just leave this glasses on and just tap, and then it closes, and then I do my stuff, open it again. But yeah, I think that's more for the future.
Sure, especially VR, I think it needs new paradigm in user interface design, and humans also need to adapt to new environment. If you mentioned about mixing in VR, I saw some YouTube videos on that as well. It looks really interesting, really cool. But if I'm in the environment, I was doing experiencing this AR demo. It took me about 10 minutes to get used to this new environment, and then you have to grab the object with this controller, and I failed to do that for a couple of times, and then eventually managed to grab this and then move it around. But it took me like 10 minutes, or maybe probably more, just to get the basic idea of how to use it. So I think we're really in the early stage of developing new interface for new technology. I think definitely that's something that we need to work on. I mean, you mentioned about personalized HLTF. Actually, that's because we do spatial audio psychoacoustic research. We've been recently doing 3D localization tests with real sources, different positions, different azimuths, different elevations. Actually worked by my student Maxims there, standing there. Yeah, we've been doing lots of localization tests with different types of sound sources, and we also used individualized HLTFs in binaural. But what we found is the more we do this kind of experiment, the more we realize how poor our hearing ability is. So you can't really localize things above you very accurately, even if you use personalized HLTF. So what we're trying to do is define kind of gray zones where we can't really localize things accurately anyway, even if we're using our own ears, our own HLTF. So in that case, kind of based on perceptual mechanisms, we can kind of simplify things a little bit better, and then maybe focus more on the effective things, the things that can work. So in my opinion, personalized HLTF is a big topic for debate, but for VR, I think people have too much hope on that. It's okay.
Yeah, just when you're listening to spatialized audio completely on its own, I think it does help in terms of the perceived distance of something from behind you, in my experience. But I think when you're working game engines and VR, you've also got visual references to reassure what the brain is hearing, and it all comes together like a lot more gracefully, I would say.
That auditory visual interaction is another important area to work on. Okay, so great. At this point, I'd like to invite some questions or comments for, maybe, could you wait for the microphone? Thank you.
Yeah, just the last thing that you mentioned, that's actually exactly the point. When you have a visual representation mixing in the VR, isn't there a huge danger that it would actually give too much information, that you don't focus enough on your spatial hearing, that you actually, if there was an error, a mistake in the sonic placement, that you wouldn't hear it because your eye already had the information, oh, it's supposed to be there, you're going to be fine. So wouldn't it be actually make more sense to mix spatial audio without a visual representation?
I guess my thoughts on that are, it's kind of like when you don't notice good sound, you kind of notice bad sound. So if you're watching a film and the audio is really badly mixed, that's going to piss you off. But if it's really good, you're just going to enjoy the film. So maybe it's something similar to that. Like, as long as it's like mixed well and makes sense with what the eye's seeing, you're not really it's not going to bother you. But if it's badly mixed and you're seeing something over here and the sound's over there, then obviously that's going to confuse you and just throw you off.
But
yeah, and I think you mix differently to picture as well. So I think if you didn't have those cues, then you'd make different mix decisions and they wouldn't be right for the end product.
Mixing to picture is one of those strange things, because I think we've all done this, where especially with music, you have to mix to the picture. And if you listen to the soundtrack from the actual video, it always sounds wrong without the picture, which means you're doing your job properly. Because when you go, and if you're doing a straightforward band and it goes to the guitar solo, you want to hear the guitar solo, and you've always got to hear it slightly out of context from the general mix. And it's the worst thing in the world is when I'm always having mixes sent to the band, and they'll listen to the mix, but not bother watching the video. And they come back and go, well, the guitar's too loud in that bit. It's like, well, yes, because the other thing is you've got to see the crowd. Every time you see a picture of the crowd, you've got to put crowd noise in there, because people want to hear the crowd. Yeah. And then crowd noise is the most complicated thing. I tried to make a crowd sound like a crowd is a very, very... what I would like is like an AI crowd that actually sounds like a crowd, because when you stand amongst 10,000 people, you blot off the 5 people behind you talking on their phones. You just listen to the fact and appreciate the fact you've got 10,000 people around you, and that's the crowd you hear. The microphone hears the person standing next to you talking to their girlfriend saying, you should be here, it's really great. I'm going to film it for you anyway. Look, I'm filming it. Can you see that? Can you see that? And they're ignoring that. And this is, so that's what I want. I want the AI crowd simulator.
If we're on wish lists, when I was working in the studio a lot, I seem to remember the most chaotic moment was when you're kind of trying to get levels to tape or disc or whatever, and then you're also simultaneously trying to get a mix out to the band's headphones. So if there was something that could just like see what the input is and feed it intelligently back to the musicians without you having to think about it, or at least get you in a good starting point for the musicians, so they can just start playing without you having to do 2 things at once. I think that would probably be quite useful.
Yeah. So the technology that can help you focus more on the creative side. You don't have to worry about tidying up things and fixing things, right? Yeah.
I actually would just want to add one point in general to AI. I think you, in my opinion at least, you should have to earn your AI help. Because what if the plugin breaks down or whatever, and you have no clue how to remove a click or a pop or EQ or whatever. So you really have to know what you're doing, and then you earn the help of the AI assistant. Yeah, or like in live sound, if you have no clue what delay compensation is, and you just rely on the AI to do it, and the thing breaks down, what do you do? Yeah. So I think that's also something, and that's the danger. How do you distinguish? The top management saying, we have this AI thing. They can do automatic mixes. We get rid of all the sound engineers. I mean, of course, I'm exaggerating. So I think it is for people that already really know what to do, to give them, help to focus on the actual task at hand.
Yeah, that's a good point.
This comes back to one thing that you mentioned earlier. Is you're editing pops and clicks on badly recorded location things. And this is a direct result of the fact that there's very few sound recorders. Nowadays, you can just send the reporter out with someone with a camera and a little zoom attached to the top, and there's hardly any sound recorders, which used to be a specialist profession and is now done by people who have very little training. And the quality of sound if you compare sound on news from 20 years ago compared to sound on news now, there's a massive drop in quality.
Yeah.
I have a small wish for 360 film. So you don't have space for a boom mic. So you have to put lavs on everyone.
That's
and
a
to have the
challenge,
metadata that actually tracks where all the characters are, and you can bring that into your DAW, would be very nice.
Yeah.
Because if you have 5 characters and each lav you need to automate, it's a
You don't
pain.
have to pan every individual movement yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, $1 million idea.
Sure.
There you go.
Any points? Yeah, Peter.
It sounds like several of you have said that what you'd kind of like is a computer-aided, auditory scene design assistant that can actually be looking at your soundscape and be instructed to look out for certain kinds of things. You've all come up with slightly different uses for them, but it's the same thing.
Yeah, that's right. Any more points? Yeah.
Well, it's really nice to see that all the professionals, successful professionals, agree that there is need for AI in this discipline, in this sector. And we just need to define and decide where and what exactly we'll do. But I'd like to ask you, how do you feel about sharing your data with the AI providers? Because that will be the way the AI will come to existence.
Which data do you mean? Just source tracks and
everything.
I want everything.
Go to Facebook.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Well, just a matter of communication and of exchanging what you want to do with what we do. Yeah, yeah. I mean, at one point, I think we don't need AI like we need air to breathe, but it would be nice to have. It's one of these nice to have that would facilitate our concentration on the more interesting things.
Yeah, but for machine learning, data is everything. You need to have lots of data to learn the patterns and everything. But I mean, researchers sometimes struggle to get enough data set to train the machine. I mean, there are some multi-track database repository by Brett. Yeah, I mean, there are loads of like a HRTF database and all this useful database, but we don't really have so much data from professional world, sound engineers, that we can actually use the data to create really nice working machine.
The problem is that if we don't have, sorry to interrupt, if we don't have the data, we won't be able to address your needs.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see that me giving someone the data is going to take away my job in my lifetime. Might take away someone else's job in like 30 years' time or whatever, but...
So more specifically, what kind of data would you need? I mean, to benefit? I mean, is it recording?
That'd be great.
One of the problems is we have that in broadcasting, for instance, the pressure and the turnaround is so quick, so quick. And I have 5 different things to do every day from a 45-minute documentary, and it's really so fast-paced that there's almost no time to kind of sit back and say, okay, now I gather all this information, I invite you, and we really concentrate for a couple of days on these kind of things. The company is usually not allowing that. No, we need you. We are really tight on personnel and try to churn out as much as we can and these kind of things. So that's one of the issues too, that it's so fast-paced these days. Yeah, but it's not an excuse, but it's one of the challenges that we have. Yeah.
Do we need AI? I think you'll get a different answer depending on who you ask. I think someone mentioned earlier on that, for example, setting your filters, you get AI to do that for you. It's like really boring work or whatever. I was talking to one engineer once, and I said like AI could remove all the donkey work out of your recording session. And he said to me, I like doing the donkey work. And I kind of get it. I mean, and I guess an analogy would be that generation of engineers who grew up using tape machines to record and mix on. There was that downtime for your ears. You'd stop the tape, you'd have to rewind it physically, and as that's happening, that would give you time to think about something else or do something else. Now we're in the world indoors where you just hit space bar and the music's there immediately. So going back to the donkey work thing, like doing things that seem quite boring sometimes gives you kind of the cognitive freedom and space to think about things. So AI definitely has a place, but I don't know if everyone's going to be comfortable with it because some people like the fact that you have brain downtime.
One thing I thought would be useful, because I myself as a recording engineer, when I work overnight, when I work really late, I can't trust my ears really, because I come back to it next morning and I don't like it, I fix it, and I come back to it again, and then, 10, 20 years ago, when you pay a lot of money to hire studios and you work there for 3 days, really tight, and that's it. If you make decision once, then that's it. You can't, if you want to come back and recall and everything, it costs money. But these days, people can use DAW every day. You can fix problems really easily, but I don't think it's necessarily a good thing because you always get back to it and you don't like what you did and you keep fixing and you can't make decision in the end. So in my opinion, especially when you work overnight, I think it's really it'd be great to have some kind of machine tool that can kind of help you make the right decision.
In my opinion, I don't think it's a good thing to have anything that encourages or helps people to work through the night. It's just bad and unhealthy.
That's the fundamental thing.
I think that the data collection issue, I think, is going to work in either one of two ways. You're either going to be having a personal system where it's collecting your data for your benefit, in which case you're going to have control of it, and you're going to go and buy a box that helps you do your work, or you're going to subscribe to a general sort of a central node where all the engineers contribute to the way they do something. So, because we all do repetitive tasks, if you're doing that, everyone does. If you're doing pop rock music, you do bass drum, snare drum, hi-hat, bass, guitar, and you're going to find it, and it'll be an average. And the thing about an average is it'll only ever be an average. So you'd have good engineers contributing, bad engineers contributing, and that way they'll get a medium, they'll get a medium way of doing things, which will be acceptable. But it won't be great. It'll never be as good as me, but it'll be an average. Or you get the personal thing where, if you want to buy my settings of how to be me, I could then lease or sell you that personal way. I think it's either going to work in one or two ways or both.
Okay, great. Any more points or questions? Yeah, Alessandro.
I have a question about the donkey work and the interface and the workflow altogether. So it's going to be a complex question, probably. How much you think your workflow is consciously or unconsciously influenced by the interface, is the machine you experience every day in your work? So the donkey work can be relaxing or can be stressing. So I guess there's a lot of that that maybe you never thought about. So can you just stop and think about interfaces that you love the most or you hate the most, or how they influence the final product? Because I bet they do.
Yeah, okay. I mean, you have your favorite kind of tools. The more they kind of disappear as far as the tool is concerned, and the more they kind of help me intuitively to reach what I want, the more I like it. And I choose my tools not only depending on that. I choose it first and foremost how they sound, of course, yeah. And if they sound fantastic, but they're a little bit awkward to operate, I don't care because I can adapt. The human being can adapt very quickly, and so. It's a different tool. It's maybe a little bit awkward to operate, but the sound is great. I use it, yeah, of course. If it's intuitive, it's you operate, of course, and there are EQs that have fantastic things to do and compressors or whatever. But the first and foremost thing will be, is it really doing what I want it to do? Is it sounding the way it does? Because I can adapt quickly, and if I use it, enough times, it's second nature, of course, yeah. If those come together, great sound and fantastic usability, fantastic, great, I'll take it even more. But it's not the first criterion, yeah.
I don't know, to me, I would say almost the opposite. If it's easy to use, then I'll use it. If it's really complicated or annoying to use, unless it's fulfilling a need that I've just got to get this thing done, then I'm not going to spend time learning it because, everyone's on a deadline, so you tend to just go to things that work, how to use them, how to get good results with them. So, even though in theory you might like to explore and experiment with different things, in general the time frames are such that you just don't have time to. You just go with what you know is going to work.
Yeah, but I fully agree also with that. But you end up at a kind of a bunch of tools that how they work and they sound the way you want them to work. that there's no contradiction in my opinion. If I just don't use it because it's super complicated, but it gives me that little notch of sound, I'm fully on your side. You know, we have a very tight deadline, and if we have arrived at something that really works, I'll take it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Great. I'm conscious of time.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on to the last point I want to bring up. How should we balance human effort and machine effort? So when you work with machines, how much of your input? Of course, the final decision has to be made by human engineers. That's what I believe. But how much trust would you put into machines, and what kind of, like Alessandro said in this morning, what would you trust an intelligent machine to do for you? What sort of job? Everything. The biggest hurdle, with automated mixing and everything, because human engineers kind of feel a little bit. Of course, we are pros, and we are working at the top level, and we don't really have to worry about losing our jobs, because machines can never actually achieve what human engineers can achieve, in an artistic and creative sense. But machines can help us do a better job, or maybe fix some problems we have. But when drum machines came along, a lot of drummers were really they hated it because they might lose the job. But they didn't, they survived, and we still need real human drummers. But how much of machine and how much of human effort?
That's a really good analogy. I think, we've been cheating since the invention of tape machines.
Yeah.
In the late 40s. Before that, you were recording onto wax cylinders or wax discs. You had two options, start and stop. If the musicians made a mistake, you had to do it again and again and again until they got it right. Tape machines came along, all of a sudden, just record 4 or 5 takes, take the best bits, cut it together, none's the wiser. That type analogy just made with drum machines, MIDI as well. I think when MIDI first came on the scene, the Musicians' Union was up in arms about this thing that was going to take over everyone's jobs and stuff like that. So, history always repeats itself. It's just going to be another form of augmentation to the workflow, not just in music, but in everything. I don't think it's necessarily anything to be sort of scared about. I think it's just going to make our lives easier, like all technology kind of has.
I think our responsibility is to the end user. If it helps us do a better job, then it's a good thing. And if it gives a better experience for the listener, then it's a good thing. And sometimes we have to swallow our pride. We may not want to have to do this particularly, but if it helps us to do the big picture is what's important. If it's, I don't really like doing this. I don't really like using software. I get a bit confused. I don't like typing, but the end result is better. So I use it, and I use artificial intelligence and computers and things like this to do a better job if I can. I would like to see more integration of new technologies in my workplace. And I've got a warehouse full of things that I bought that I thought were going to make my life easier. I've got more MIDI controllers than the local music store that didn't make it easier, but I keep persevering and trying to find better ways to improve my workflow. Because my responsibility is to the artist, but ultimately to the audience and to the listener. And I think we should never lose sight of that.
That's a good point. Yeah. Agreed.
We're all agreed.
Oh, agreed. That's great. Any more questions? We have about 2-3 minutes. Yeah, Rob.
Just inspired by what John just said there. I'd be interested to know from each of the panelists, what's been the biggest game-changing tool for you in your profession? Because I think you can always learn from what's happened when looking to the future. So I'd be interested to know.
Well, I'll start off. DAW for me, definitely. Yeah, DAW, absolutely. In post-production, documentary filmmaking, unthinkable without it today. Just undo, unbelievable tool. Undo, DAW and undo. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, we were still using a bit of tape, it was a bit of everything when I first started, so the DAW, but I think the biggest change, but Pro Tools has always been around since I've been working, but the biggest change has been mixing in the box and not mixing on console anymore, and having the ability to have that sort of computing power just at home has probably been the biggest change.
Yeah.
For me, it's digital delay. The fact that I can delay time accurately. So I've got the ability now to align components that aren't physically in the same place, so that I can EQ things really accurately, and I can make a cohesive sound field, and that's really important. And so the ability to control time in that way. And if only I could get time to go backwards, that'd be even better.
And for me, it's definitely been the binaural tools that have developed in the last 2 years by IEM in Austria, Graz, or by Dear Reality. It's really crazy how much progress has happened in the last even year as far as ambisonics and that kind of stuff. If you're not convinced about binaural, I have a sample with me. A couple of you have tried already, and it's an orc that tells a story.
Yeah, ambisonic has been an area where only mathematicians or highly technical people can understand how to use it. But these days, it's made really easy to work on ambisonics, because encoding, decoding, IEM tools, and there are other great tools that made the workflow so easy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
this isn't for me personally, but I think everyone in the room takes it utterly for granted. But electricity. When the music industry first started out, they were using acoustic horns and mechanical-driven lathes, by hand or counterweights with weights or what have you. So electricity came along, and suddenly you had like moving core microphones and mixing desks, and it's just like, that's it.
Yeah. So if we look back after 30 years or so, if you look back this discussion and all this, discussion about AI technology, I'm sure we'll be using AI a lot in music production and everything in maybe 10 years time. So I think it's really not important to keep discussing on this topic and trying to communicate with researchers, engineers, and researchers also need to talk to practitioners and really try to work together to find the best way forward, I think. It has to continue. Time is short. We have to finish here today. So, thank you very much, all of the panelists.